Namaskar, good morning. This is Kate, the Greenie Yogini. Thank you for joining me. We're talking about concentration. And that's because I've been asked, how do you concentrate in meditation? So let's explore this a little bit more. We're talking about Pratyahara. Pratyahara is to withdraw the mind. One of the aspects of Pratyahara, which is the third phase of it, is to do with expansion of the mind, which is Ekendriya. So let us look at what does it mean to withdraw the mind from what it usually thinks about and then to start to expand the mind. And when anything expands in human life, we get happy. So we'll talk about that as well. At times when we go very, very deeply internally, it's like going inside a Himalayan cave because there's something to explore or to know more about ourselves. And doing retreats like Vipassana or meditation retreats or detoxes where we go away from our usual schedule, our usual life, and go inside, it creates a tremendous energy inside oneself because we begin expanding our mind. We focus and then expand. That whole experience, it's a good expression of what happens when we withdraw into a retreat into ourselves. Every time we sit to meditate, we can withdraw our minds through Pratyahara, through bringing the mind through visualization to a place inside ourselves where we focus. And that one focus becomes our point of concentration. So each day I'm doing some very simple visualizations with you to help to bring that Pratyahara, the first essence of withdrawal, into your meditation practice. Another aspect of the mind is that the mind doesn't like to withdraw. The mind likes to expand. So I've noticed the phenomena, and this is really very current. I've noticed the phenomena that as soon as I find any series on Netflix or any of Foxtel or any of, we watch iView in Australia, ABC iView. As soon as my mind gets caught up in the characters of any particular series, I will want to watch it right through to the very, very end. It's like reading a book. It's like I want to see, where do they go next? What happens? Do they understand this? Is their life going to expand? And watching through a series of whatever it is, crime or romance or drama, I feel my mind expand, especially as more and more characters, more and more background, more and more information gets brought in. So anyone who's watched any series will know what I'm talking about. Now, this phenomena, I learned it when I was in media school a couple of years ago. We were starting to find inside this learning how to be a filmmaker, it was becoming apparent, this is pre-COVID, that series that evolve, that expand the main characters' stories, those expansions of learning or understanding or drama or entertainment, they are much more viewed than something that has a beginning, a middle, and an end. The idea that it's endless is much more attractive to the viewers. So that's one way to look at what happens when we're meditating, where we disengage from what we normally are thinking about, our normal emotions, our day-to-day schedule. We stop, we sit down, legs are turned up. The idea that I'm sitting like this is so that my feet are turned up off the earth, and I've said to the earth, no, I'm not walking anywhere. The palms of my hands will be turned up in either place or threaded together and sitting with the palms facing upwards. The tip of the tongue will be turned up towards the roof of the mouth, which disengages the taste. The eyes are closed, and the eyes inside the head, they're just disengaged by the eyelids. In some cases, and I've seen it with myself when I'm meditating, because we start to focus in the pineal and pituitary glands, in the Agya chakra and the Sahasrara chakra. And as we do that, you'll often notice with meditators that they start, because the mind is looking to this area of the body. So we tend to start sitting like this. And it's another reason why sitting with your legs crossed is very helpful, because it's very hard to fall back. When you're in this position, we get locked basically. So that's for long meditation. This is a better position to stay in, because of that sensation. People, as the mind, we call it the Kundalini, as the energy inside the mind rises, and it automatically will rise as we think more and more subtly, then our bodies also start to lift slightly. So that's the physical sensation of it. The psychic sensation is that I'm withdrawing my mind from all of the things that I'm usually attached to, the way that I normally think, the habits that I normally have in my thinking. So there's a whole world around attitudes. To cultivate an attitude of gratitude will lift and elevate the mind more than an attitude of resentment and complaining. Now, why is that so? That's so because the hormones to do with holding onto and possessing and owning are very much engaged in the pancreas and the adrenal glands, which is fear, flight, and fight, and the whole digestive system. The particular hormones that we need to digest our food, to grasp the food, and to assimilate it into our bodies. A lot happens in this area. And the hormones that feed that whole process are also connected to a vast array of microbiome that lives inside our guts, which is bacteria and viruses that, and bacteriophages. I'll have to look it up again. Bacteriophages. That all are combined like an ecosystem inside of us. And all of them are hungry. All of them have certain nutritional demands, and certain ones like more acidic, certain bacteriophages like more alkaline food. And then as they put the demands in the body, there's a vagus nerve that goes back up to the brain. So it's almost like the critters in the kitchen are asking us what they want to eat. Sugar, please. Coffee, please. Whatever it is. Your creatures in your tummy are very different from the ones in mine. So they're talking all the time because they're just another kind of animal, if you like, that's hungry. This is all the viruses, the bacteria, the microbiome in your belly is alive. And there's more cells in there that don't belong to you than do. We have more, we carry more little critters inside ourselves than we actually have cells in our bodies. So we are just a living ecosystem, each one of us. And your ecosystem, the countries and the oceans and the landscapes that you carry are very, very different from mine, depending upon what you feed yourself, depending upon the bacteriophages and so on that live inside of each one of us. And they have a certain tendency or a certain behavior. Some are very positive and very helpful for our bodies, and some that we know mostly about are diseases that are going to cause coronavirus or different kind of malaria, cancer, and so on. So that's the story on the physical realm, but it's starting to become physico-psychic. We start to see that the physical world impacts our psychic world. And there is a lot of discussion now in the scientific world around this, that certain illnesses create a certain kind of hormonal behavior, like depression or anxiety or weakness of mind. Also, we know that sugar and so on, so it must be feeding some kind of microorganisms, that sugar, and that creates aggression. Definitely alcohol, sugar, and certain drugs, once they're consumed in the body, we become aggressive. And that again is a hormonal experience. It's to do with the adrenal glands at the back of the body, on the kidneys. So when we disengage from that kind of thinking, anxiety, bitterness, frustration, depression, we're lifting our mind out of our guts, basically, and perhaps the poor choices of foods that we've been making, and we're lifting them up to an area in the Anahat chakra or the thymus gland, and beyond that to the thyroid and parathyroid glands. We start to lift our mind into areas where the hormones have nothing to do with ownership and possession and that level of pride. It's more subtle. It's to do with the feeling of love and attachment and connection through those deeper experiences. So those who have experienced heartache or a longing, it doesn't, like anger hits the guts, but those higher emotions hit the chest and the throat. And curiously, if one has a desire, and I'm thinking about this in terms of my dad, if one has a desire to share or to be of service, often such people will take a role of speaking. Now that's this gland, the thyroid and parathyroid, connected to the voice box. And the whole immune system here is here inside these glands, the thyroid, the parathyroid, and the thymus. This area is all about wellness. It's all about healing. It's all about sharing information. So what happens when we're meditating? We disengage our mind from its usual thinking. We withdraw the mind into our body and we lift the mind just through the way that we're thinking, which is of benevolence. And gratitude really helps with that. When I'm showing gratitude towards others, then in my mind, I'm envisaging them in a state of wellness. It lifts my mind away from the hatred, the anger, the envy, the greed, the entitlement, and the revenge that might come when I'm keeping my mind stuck in the lower chakras, so to speak, or the functions of the body that have to do with ownership, possession, and nutrition for myself, feeding oneself, so to speak. When I lift my mind more into the areas where I'm thinking of the well-being of others, then I'm hitting the heart and the throat area. So how does the mind work in these areas? There's something that's called, the mind can only think within a certain range of frequency. And that's as far as we can go. It's like on a guitar, for example. And this is a very Buddhist concept, that there's a string, and if I string it too tight, it's going to snap. And if I string it too loose, it's going to get so low that you won't be able to hear it anymore. So the mind can run between the lowest and the highest vibration of the human capacity. Mm-hmm. And that inside that range, that's all we know. That's all we've got. So there are sounds that are far too high that we can't hear, that a dog can pick up. And there's sounds that are so loud and low that they're rumbling that we can't hear them, like an earthquake. Again, dogs seem to be able to pick those ones up. And goldfish, curiously enough. Before an earthquake, all the goldfish start jumping out of the pond. So, human experience is within a certain range. Now, meditation, we could say, and this is one idea of Magda. It means that we expand our frequency to be able to experience beyond the highest and the lowest. We're able to, if you like, strengthen our nervous system through meditation, through focusing and staying inside experiences that may be uncomfortable or may be extremely blissful. And the nervous system starts to expand but endure a greater and greater capacity. That particular idea is not involved in Tantra. Tantra, the idea of Ekendriya, is a different kind of expansion. The idea of Ekendriya is that we're sitting and the mind is like a cloud. And the cloud, as it expands, it encompasses everything that it's covering. So when we start meditation, it's like our mind might be like a small cloud over on the horizon somewhere. And that's first of all, whether or not we feel even connected to that cloud, our own mind often is so disjointed from what we're doing that we don't even understand what we're thinking or feeling. And I've heard so many people, I've heard myself say it at times. Somebody will say, "You seem really angry." And I'll go, "I'm not angry. Stop yelling at me." And I'm the one who's yelling in the room, but I can't see. But if somebody says to me, "It looks to me like you're actually feeling frustrated," or you have a sense of bitterness inside you, I can stop and think, not what I'm doing, being angry, but what am I feeling? I'm feeling bitter. I'm feeling resentful. Then I can actually own my thoughts and feel them. So that cloud, as we do meditation, we start to analyze our behaviors. Could be what other people have said to us, can be what we're starting to feel ourselves, and we start to recognize our own feelings. We cannot squash those feelings. Feelings are feelings. If we try to suppress them, and I've tried to do this in my life, tried to control the anger that I feel, for example, or the joy and the desire to give, if it's rejected and there's nowhere to put that, it can create tremendous frustration. And it's the same with the anger. If there's nowhere to direct it and channel it because it's not being received, i.e., I'm trying to change somebody or control someone, and they're not going to do what I say, very normal. If that frustration starts to come back in on myself, it's extremely destructive. So the idea with our propensities is not to control them necessarily, but learn how to channel them. And of course, if we want to lead a life where we're starting to lift our mind away from attachment, pride of ownership, and possessiveness, and assimilation, which is all to do with the tummy, if we want to bring ourselves to the spaces where we're experiencing giving, gratitude, really true well-wishing for others, which seems to lift the mind out of ourselves and takes us to a higher plane, a higher frequency, a more peaceful state, basically. If we want to detach ourselves from that conflict that exists in human life, to a place where we're more of service, more of giving, more relaxed and more loving, then we need to take those kind of actions in our daily life as well, where we are focused on what can I give rather than what can I receive. Now that sounds a little bit sort of, maybe a little bit too religious and moralistic. So I'm going to come away from that concept. Knowing that it's a truth doesn't necessarily mean that any of us believe it. It's like, okay, how will I discover that? Certainly in meditation, what I know is when I'm sitting in a space where I want for myself and I feel entitled and I feel like it's being taken from me or I'm missing out, that's envy, that's greed, that's pride based on entitlement, then I am activating my adrenal glands. And much as I might talk to myself to, hide it or try to manipulate, or I come up with plotting instead of pausing, much as I might do all of that, ultimately I can feel it corroding my very inner being. When my mind goes to a different level and it starts to think about, okay, let me see what happens if I wish well upon that person who seems to have so much more than I, for example, or the one who's opposing me and holding me back. What if I wish them well and let them go with what they want? And I take myself away to a place where I feel safe, in my mind, in my heart, where I can expand. And I wish them well in that parting, rather than engaging inside my mind with that battle of ownership and possession. Then my mind begins to lift and I can feel inside myself an expansion. So that's when the cloud, instead of being that small cloud concentrating only in that small area of ownership, possession, resentment, once that starts to expand to I wish you well and I wish others well, and what happens is the mind starts to encompass or engage in a new way of thinking about that situation, that person, the cloud of the mind. We call it ectoplasmic particles. They begin to expand. And I get a sense of not so much control and well-being through I know what I'm going to do, but a sense of wellness that there's something here that's new that might evolve if I let go. And in letting go, I still have a sense of connection, but it's not control. It's a connection in that I'm wishing you well. So I'm still observing what's happening, but I'm not engaging to try to control what you do so that I'll get a better outcome than you. I'm going to dominate the situation, which is very normal. Human beings, we like to dominate. So as that mind expands, in my meditation, what I'll feel that my mind is lifting away from the physical body. In fact, I start to forget. Even my legs will fall asleep and I won't realize that. And it takes quite a bit to get me back here, like a mosquito bite or something. And even at times, a mosquito can be buzzing, but because the feeling of expansion is so, it's a very pleasant feeling. It's a very peaceful, but also powerful feeling to feel one's mind and emotions and sense of self expanding as we lift away from the day-to-day troubles. That cloud, as it covers, this is the idea inside Tantra. It grows until it accumulates so much, I would say, wisdom, but such a sense of connection that it covers the entire sky. The mind starts to feel everything that I think of. I feel connected to it, and I have a sense of wellness, a sense of not engagement, a sense of detachment, but loving detachment to each and every aspect of my life. I can sit inside it, and instead of fighting the situations at work or in my relationships or with my neighbors or with the community or with my family, wherever there's relationship and I feel called in, instead of that happening, the mind expands and there's this overall sense of continuum, wellness. It's love. It's a sense of love. That is Ekendriya. That is the expansion of mind. So it's more than just, getting a nervous system that can take the high notes and the low notes, that can broaden our experience without cracking, which is one way of existing in life. Instead of that, taking the middle path, if you like, the idea in Tantra is to expand and expand and expand. So we begin to encompass everything. And as soon as we do that, we start to touch the mind of God. Now, the mind of God is another whole conversation. So I'll save that one for the next installment. In the meantime, let's do a few minutes of meditation using the mantra. I have, there we are. I put it out of tune, but I put it back in again. Okay, let's do our mantra, Bhavanam Kevalam, and do a few minutes meditation together. Oh, and if you enjoy these morning classes around how to meditate and how to concentrate, please hit the subscribe button because, of course, I'll build up my YouTube channel, which will help to sustain me to continue to do these classes. And if you have any questions, please, please, please send them through to me. So message me. I've got a Facebook page, Kate Kazoni. The two are linked. So message me at Kate Kazoni, and any of your questions that come through, I'll be able to answer for you. And particularly in this next little stretch of time, we're talking about concentration and pratyahara, withdrawal of the mind. So if anything's coming up in those areas, please send me a message and I will come back round to answering them. Let's do some meditation. We're using the mantra Bhavanam Kevalam, all is love, all is one. Bhavanam, Bhavanam Kevalam, Bhavanam, Bhavanam Kevalam, Bhavanam Kevalam, Bhavanam Kevalam. Baba na Kevala Baba na Kevala Baba na Kevala Baba na Kevala. Okay, so sitting with the eyes closed, back up straight. Imagine you seated high upon a mountain, family and friends far, far below. You're all alone. Surrounding is the vastness of the universe. And imagine yourself seated inside a sphere, and that sphere is beginning to expand. Everything that surrounds you is infused with the mantra Baba Nam Kevalam. And as that sphere expands beyond the horizon, above, behind, in front, below, imagine that every creature upon the earth is infused with the essence of the mantra Baba Nam Kevalam. All is love, all is one. Everything that you hold within your life is within that vast, vast circle of love and light, and infused with the mantra Baba Nam Kevalam. All is love, all is one. And imagine that sphere of love and light to expand beyond the planet, through the stratospheres, into the universe surrounding. Gazing back upon the planet Earth, feel the same essence of love, of oneness extend through the universe to the planets in our solar system, beyond into the stars and the galaxies. Feeling that everything in the universe and the universes beyond ours is infused by that cosmic love. Baba Nam Kevalam. All is love, all is one. And focusing on oneself, allowing the thoughts of our mind, the feelings inside our heart, sensations of the body, all to begin to merge into the one aspect of self, like a droplet. That too merges and dissolves into that vast ocean of cosmic oneness. Baba Nam Kevalam. All is love, all is one. And let's finish our meditation. Quiet place deep inside of me. Feel the love all around me. I've never been alone since I've known there's a place where I can go, where love is all around. Since I've found how to hear that sweetest sound. Baba Nam, Baba Nam Kevalam. Love is everywhere, love is everyone. Thank you so much for joining me. We will be going to the garden today to practice Pratyahara, concentration and withdrawal of the mind in practical life. What's the point of doing all this time meditating if life is still the same when we finish? Not much use. So let's apply what we're learning in our meditation, not only in our yoga practices, and I do have those coming up each day, how to develop the glands and the hormones that are needed to stop the mind from rushing around after different things, because that's the nature of the mind. How to help the mind to focus, to concentrate, and then expand. So we're doing yoga practices for that, and then we also need to bring it to our real life. I'm Kate. I'm the Greenie Yogini. Thank you so much for joining me. See you in the garden later. Namaskar. First of all, another question's come through. Why am I not anymore dressed in white clothes like a little mini kind of swami? Thank you for asking that question. It is related to Pratyahara and withdrawing the mind. So at the time when I started doing yoga classes, first of all, I noticed, because the room that I was in, which is another one of our yoga studios, that the sunlight coming behind was creating a silhouette. And the silhouette meant that when I wore dark clothes, black, you couldn't see my arms or legs when I was crossing them over. So I understood it's kind of sensible to wear white gear. Then there was another thing happening. It was the beginning of coronavirus, and I had the news that my father was dying. Sometimes those words, that someone's dying, gives the impression that they've gone to bed and they're in the last throes before the last rites being administered. It wasn't that. It was cancer. And in fact, he lived with his cancer for 6 years, which was amazing. And what I was aware of is that in terms of dying, what was happening was that his internal organs, the cancer was growing, and that meant that different organs would be not functioning as well, some of them getting squashed, some of them deteriorating, depending on what the cancer was doing inside the body. So I understood that my father's body would be degenerating. And of course, that meant that it would eventually lead to death, which it did. Dad died last year in August. So during that time, and we were in COVID, I went through my own internal process about grief. And I must admit that wearing white clothes every day to class, somehow, in some sense, it lifted my spirits, because a lot of the time at the beginning, I wasn't able to be with Dad. Eventually, I did stay with him for 13 months before he died. But in the first part of it, I couldn't easily get back to Melbourne to see him, and I wanted to connect myself with him. And so emotionally, somehow dressing every day in the white clothes and practicing the yoga, I felt like I was beginning a process of my own withdrawal, if you like, into the grief that I knew I'd be going through. So we call it pre-grief. And knowing that on the future there was a big event about to happen in my life, which would be to lose him physically, I started preparing myself, and doing the yoga classes with you all really helped, because it felt like I was connecting to humanity. All of us at some stage or other lose loved ones. There's no way to get through life without touching and learning about death in our own ways. So I felt that I was part of a communal experience, and I felt that many people during that time were losing loved ones and struggling with health. At the beginning of COVID, there was a lot of death. And a lot of cultures use white clothes to mourn inside of, especially in India, but there's a place all through Southeast Asia and Asian countries, and to some degree in Africa, the idea of putting on white after a loved one's left is, instead of in the West, we wear black. So I felt somehow I was using the color white was connecting me to the spiritual world. It's a sentient color, it's a subtle color. Excuse me, I'm going to sneeze. Sometimes sneezing is a way to let things go. I'm just going to let go of that, that idea about Dad and his death. Anyway, I've come back now. So to answer the question, why am I not wearing white anymore? It's like that time's over for me. I finished the grieving. It was extremely internal. I felt as I was coming closer to the realizing that Dad would be leaving me, I needed to go inside. I needed to take time out and start to prepare my mind for that emotional loss, that blow, as well as I needed to readjust my mind to identity changes. My father dying has changed the identity of my family, the identity of my mother, my sisters, and it's changed my place inside that family structure, definitely. So I needed time to prepare for all of that and what might come up. That's finished now. I don't feel I've reconciled myself with Dad's death. I miss him every single day, and a part of continuing with yoga classes is because he set an example for me to continue teaching up to the last minute. And he died on a Saturday night, and his last class was the Thursday, 3 days before that. He was on Zoom teaching cosmology. I love that he worked right up to the last minute, to the last breath. And I hope to be able to follow his example. So coming back now, I'm out of the clothes of mourning, which is what the white ultimately represented for me. And I'm re-establishing myself back into the spiritual practices of what I hope to be balance. That time of focus is finished for me, and I'm in the next phase, which is back into expansion. And what I've learned needs to now be expressed. So I'm taking on the challenge of Kate, the greenie yogini, partly because I love, love, love eating greens. Secondly, because I love, love, love growing greens. And the third thing is I love, love, love detoxing and teaching other people how to get well using greens. And that's all tied up inside my yoga practice. So that's the persona, and that's what I'm doing. Now, on to withdrawing the mind.